There's truly a special kind of magic when a horror franchise understands that its real monster isn't a mask, a knife, a person, or even death itself. It's cosmic meaninglessness. It is a human facing down forces so much bigger than they are. That's why Happy Death Day works so well. On the surface, it's slasher meets Groundhog Day, a slasher movie that collides with a time loop comedy premise. A college student keeps getting murdered on the night of her birthday and keeps waking up at the start of that same day until she figures out who's killing her and how to stop it. But underneath that playful pitch is something that feels oddly spiritual, oddly existential, not in a preachy kind of way, more like the film accidentally taps into something old and spiritual. If you were forced to live the same day over and over again, you wouldn't just try to survive it. You'd eventually be forced to become someone else because repetition does that to you. It reveals what you actually value. It reveals what you actually care about, what you actually worship. Repetition exposes what you're running from and turns the day into a mirror. And when you look closely, both films are basically about that. The loop as a kind of strange purgatory, where the point isn't just catch the killer and solve the mystery. It is to grow. It is a pressure cooker that is meant to set you on the course to become the kind of person who can finally leave and be released back out into the rest of the world. The first movie introduces us to our protagonist, Tree Gelbman, but she isn't a usual protagonist. She's the kind of person that a slasher film would usually get rid of pretty quickly. She's sharp, self involved, cruel in that casual social hierarchy kind of way. She is the standard mean girl. But the movie makes her interesting because it doesn't flatten her into a caricature or a cartoon. Tree isn't evil, she's armored, she's performative. She has been deeply damaged by life, and so she results to an air of invincibility because it's the only way that she knows how to function. It's the only way that she knows how to cope. Then the universe pulls the rug out from underneath her. She gets murdered on the night of her birthday by somebody in a babyface mascot mask. And then she wakes up and the day restarts. That loop premise is a genius horror engine because it weaponizes two basic fears at once. First, the fear of being hunted, and second, the fear of being trapped. Most slashers are about space. You're trapped in a house, a camp, a town, a hospital. Happy Death Day is about time. And time really is the ultimate trap because you can't climb out of it. You can't run past it, and you can't punch it. It also emphasizes the rather weird relationship that humans have with their birthday. Because obviously, the birthday is the day of the year that humans celebrate the birth of another human. But birthdays celebrate a day that draws you 1 year further away from the day that you were born, 1 year older, and thus 1 year closer to your last. And I think that imagery is hammered home with the babyface killer, a distorted and macabre version of innocence and the symbol of the start of the beginning for a human. And that symbol being the instrument that kills that image, then becoming the instrument for Tree's death over and over again, all on a day that you can tell Tree wants absolutely nothing to do with. And what the film does early is important. It doesn't let Tree become noble right away. It lets her do what all of us would probably do at first. She tries to outsmart the puzzle. She tries to treat it like a problem to be solved. She starts suspecting people. She starts experimenting. She starts learning the rhythm of the day, learning where danger shows up, learning which choices lead to which outcomes. And at first, it's almost empowering. In a weird way, death becomes her reset button. Her mistakes don't matter. Her consequences dissolve. And her selfishness is insulated at first. But through that, we see that a world without consequences doesn't make you free. It takes you back to childhood. Because when nothing sticks, nothing means anything. So the early loop is Tree trying to win through control. But then it introduces cost. Tree learns that she can't keep dying forever without it doing something to her. The loop isn't just a mechanic, it becomes a deadline. The story won't allow infinite resets without a price. And this is where we go from slasher puzzle to a character study, to something a lot deeper and a lot more cosmic. Tree starts noticing all of the people that she's been stepping over. The roommate she treats like furniture, the father that she shut out, the way she uses people as props in her own story. The loop becomes less about how do I survive and more about who am I really when I am forced to look at myself this closely. That's the real horror, not the killer, but the self stuck in a frame, unable to look away. Eventually, Tree's investigation leads to the false solution where she thinks that the killer is escaped serial killer John Toombs, held at the campus hospital. She even kills him in one loop, only to realize that if the loop ends there, Carter remains dead in that reality. So she chooses to reset the day again because it's the first time that Tree chooses love over control. Earlier, Tree treats death like a tool. Now she treats it like a sacrifice for the first time. And that's where you start seeing the spiritual and religious undertones, not in theology language, but in structure. Tree keeps dying, but the meaning of the death changes. At first, death is an accident. Then, death becomes a strategy. Then, death becomes an offering, a willingness to lose something so that way someone can live. That's a deeply old story shape. The loop becomes Tree's strange path toward redemption, a kind of enforced sanctification, the same day repeated until the old version of Tree just can't survive any longer. And then the reveal lands. Tree escapes the wrong story and discovers that the killer isn't Toombs. It's her roommate, Loy, who poisoned the cupcake and used her nursing job to frame Toombs when Tree didn't die the right way. Laurie's motive is jealousy tied to the professor that they both had an affair with. Now, on paper, that motive is melodrama, but emotionally, it fits the movie's frame and theme. People snap when they're trapped in narratives of resentment and comparison. Laurie is Tree's shadow, someone who also wants control, also wants to rewrite reality so she can win. The difference is, Tree's loop changes her. Laurie's grievance fossilizes her. And when Tree finally survives, the movie ends on a note that feels earned. The loop breaks, but Tree isn't the same person who entered it. She reconciles with her dad. She ends the affair. She lets Carter in. She has a chance to clean up some things from her past. She doesn't just escape death, she escapes the life that she had built for herself among people, but still isolated. That's why Happy Death Day feels so satisfying. It's truly a slasher with soul. And then the sequel comes along, adds some science, gives you a device, gives you a multiverse framework at a time where multiverses were all the rage, gives you the comforting feeling that the universe has rules if you just stare long enough at the math. But I think the real power of these movies is exactly the opposite. Because even in all of the explanations that we get, there's still something hovering over both films that never fully goes away. A kind of lingering, unsettling truth. Tree is not in control of why this is happening. While there may be some explanations, nobody is truly able to control this force of nature. They can tap into it, but it quickly shows that it has every ability to overrule any control that they put over it. They can describe mechanisms, they can name components, they can build a story that feels. They can describe the mechanisms and the components, they can give it a name. But the loop itself, the fact of the loop, the choice of Tree as its target, the timing, the moral pressure that it applies, the way it seems to respond to her inner life, that still carries the fingerprints of something older than science, something truly mythic, something that feels like the universe is not merely broken, but watching everything that's happening. And that's where these movies get surprisingly spiritual. Not because they preach at the person, but because they circle the same questions that religion and cosmic horror both circle from opposite sides. Why is this happening to me? What does it want? Is there a purpose or only complete and total randomness? And if the cosmos won't explain itself, how do I live in light of that? At some point along the way, the question shifts from how does the loop work to what does the loop feel like when you accept that you may never truly know how it works. Because that's the haunting center of the franchise. The loop is not a puzzle to be solved. The loop is a force that you survive. And more than that, the loop is a force that seems to shape Tree into somebody that she wasn't before, which is an interesting angle on the cosmos. In Happy Death Day, Tree wakes up on her birthday in Carter's room, stumbles through the day that she barely cares about, and ends the night murdered. She wakes up, same room, same morning, same day. And it's played for laughs at first, because it has to be. That's how you survive an impossible premise. You laugh at it before it laughs at you. But what's actually happening to Tree is cosmic in the most terrifying way. Not cosmic in the sense of galaxies and stars, but cosmic like the rules of reality just quietly stopped obeying you. Tree doesn't get a letter, no voice explains the terms, no prophecy, no chosen one moment. It all just happens. And she responds, she reacts to all of it. But she's never outside of the role of the one that is reacting to things outside of her control. And that's important because it means the loop doesn't feel like a gift at first. It feels like a glitch in the universe that has singled her out for reasons that she does not fully understand. And that is one of the oldest horror ideas that there is, the sense that reality is bigger than your comprehension and that you are not the main character of it, and that there are things that exist that are bigger than you could possibly wrap your mind around. Tree tries to handle it like any human would. She panics, she experiments, she attempts to gain control, she changes little variables, she tests different routes, she tries to locate the cause like it's a murder mystery, and the universe will reward her with order. But what makes that first film secretly unsettling is that the loop doesn't behave like a neutral mechanism. It behaves like an intentional pressure chamber. Because the more that Tree repeats the day, the more the day stops being a day and starts being a mirror held inches from her face. Every small cruelty becomes echoing. Every shallow habit becomes obvious. Every relationship that she is treated like furniture starts to matter a little bit more each cycle. It's almost like the loop is not only trapping her in time, but forcing her into moral clarity. And you can explain the killer, you can explain the plot, you can even tell yourself the loop is random, an accident, an absurd cosmic hiccup. But the emotional architecture of the loop keeps implying something different than that. The loop is not merely happening to Tree. The loop is working on Tree. It's helping her. It's grinding the old version of her down through repetition until she can't sustain being that person anymore. That's where the religious overtone shows up, even if you never use religious language. Tree is trapped in a kind of purgatory, not in the afterlife sense, but in the sense of a repeated day that becomes sort of a purification process. The day is the same, but Tree changes. The only way out isn't simply survive. The only way out is to become the kind of person who can live outside the loop. That's why the first film hits harder than the premise suggests, because it's not just a whodunit slasher with resets. It's a story about how death, when it refuses to finalize, becomes a teacher. Not a gentle teacher, a very brutal one. Tree starts out treating her resets like a cheat code. Consequences feel temporary, people feel temporary. Even her own body starts to feel like something that she can spend. And then the film introduces the cost, not just the physical cost, but the existential cost. Because repetition without meaning is not freedom, it's erosion. You start to blur. You start to wonder if your choices matter, if they can be undone. You start to lose the sense that your life is real if it can be restarted at any point. And this is where the cosmic angle deepens. The loop makes Tree confront the possibility that reality is not stable. And if it's not stable, then meaning has to come from somewhere else, not from control, not from certainty, from choice. Tree's growth in the first movie is often described like a character arc, like she learns a lesson and becomes nicer. But it's sharper than that. Tree's growth is the slow realization that if the universe is going to keep killing her, then she has two options: become a person whose life is only about survival, or become a person whose life is about love and truth, even inside of survival. And she chooses the latter. She starts repairing things. She starts caring. She starts seeing the people around her as souls instead of props. And the loop doesn't stop because she becomes morally perfect. That's not the point. The point is that the loop forces her to stop living like she's immortal. It forces her to live like death is real, even when it isn't final. That's the paradox. In the first film, the loop is unknowable, and because it's unknowable, it becomes almost godlike, not in personality, but in scale. It sits above Tree's understanding, shaping her life without ever explaining itself. And the moment that the loop finally breaks, it doesn't feel like she won. It feels like she graduated, like something has finally released her, deemed her ready and worthy. And that's the unnerving implication that the movie leaves on the table, even when it resolves the plot. If something released her, then something had the power to keep her. Now, while the first one utilizes slasher tropes to convey its message, the sequel leans into science. It introduces an experimental device. It gives the loop a technological context. It says, here's a reason, here's a mechanism. And sure, that works on surface, but here's the thing, a mechanism is not a meaning. It gives the loop a machine, and giving the loop a machine doesn't remove the horror of it. It reframes it. Because now the question isn't only why is this happening? It becomes what kind of universe is this? Where reality can be bent like this at all. Happy Death Day to You takes the loop and stretches it into multiverse territory. Tree wakes up in a world that looks almost like hers, but wrong in key places. Relationships are different, outcomes are different. And then comes the cruelest gift that the sequel gives her. In this alternate world, her boyfriend is with in this alternate world, her boyfriend is with somebody else. Carter is with her friend, but her mom is alive. Now, we're not dealing with solve the killer and escape. We're dealing with something bigger and far more dangerous. We're dealing with temptation. And this is where the cosmic forces vibe becomes overwhelming because think about what the universe is doing to Tree across these films. In the first film, it traps her until she becomes better, until she grows and becomes somebody new. In the second film, it puts her in a reality where she can have the thing that she can't stop wanting, the thing no amount of growth cancels out, the thing that makes every human being, no matter how mature, no matter how healed, feel like a child again, the desire to undo loss. Tree is faced with a multiverse choice that isn't really a choice, it is a wound being ripped back open. Does she cling to the world that gives her a miracle, but is filled with situations and circumstances and memories that are not her own? She has displaced that universe's version of herself and basically taken over her life. Or does she return to the world that is hers? The world where she learned what she learned, the world where her life is real, even though it is filled with pain and loss. And what's fascinating is that the sequel's scientific framing does not remove the spiritual structure of that dilemma. If anything, it intensifies it. Because in a multiverse, grief doesn't end, it just relocates. Some version of you always loses, some version of you always wins, some version of you always mourns, and some version of you is always happy. Some version of you always carries the scar. So Tree's choice becomes a kind of faith decision, not faith in religion necessarily, but faith in meaning, faith in something bigger than herself, faith that the life that she has with its pain is still worth choosing because it's hers. And this is where the cosmic unknowability becomes unavoidable again. Because even if the characters talk about algorithms and devices, you can't escape what the story is actually doing. The loop is not just giving Tree a second chance, it's confronting her with the question, what is a life? Is it the happiest set of circumstances? Is the reality where you get what you want? Is it the reality where you become who you are through loss and love and choice? That's not a scientific question. That's a philosophical one. That's a religious one. That's a spiritual one. That's a cosmic one. Because it's asking what reality is for. And then that's the most unsettling piece. Even in Happy Death Day to You, the loop doesn't feel fully tamed. Yes, there's a device in the story. Yes, there is an attempt to engineer an exit, and there are explanations given to the nuts and bolts of the loop. But even in the context of the movie, they don't fully know what caused the loop. Just that the machine went off, just that it happened. And there's really no further explanation given to any of this. Not only is the cosmos filled with forces beyond your comprehension, but they can be direction, they can be utilized, they can be played with. But the loop keeps behaving like something with a will. It punishes shortcuts. It escalates emotional stakes. It seems to respond to Tree's growth. It forces Tree into the precise moral crossroads that will go on to define her. That's the part you can't fully explain with wires, equations, or algorithms. Because if the loop is purely mechanical, it would be indifferent to Tree's inner life. But the films keep implying that Tree's inner life is exactly what's being targeted. And when Tree finally chooses to return to her original reality, it feels like the franchise's core thesis on display. You cannot escape pain by rewriting reality. You can only become strong enough to live truthfully inside of reality. That's why her growth across two films is more than just a progression towards becoming a nicer human. It's true transformation. In the first film, Tree learns empathy and responsibility. She learns to love without manipulation. She learns to be present. In the second film, she learns acceptance. She learns that love does not always mean keeping. Sometimes love means honoring what was given, even when it's taken. And if the first film is about repentance, the second film is about surrender. Not surrender to evil, surrender to the limits of being human and asking yourself the question, how do I live in context of that? Now, across both films, the cosmic forces implication becomes the weird, quiet third character. Because once you accept the loop may never be fully knowable, the franchise starts to look less like a clever premise and more like a modern myth. A myth about death, a myth about growth, a myth about the universe forcing you to confront yourself. And this is where all of those overtones really live, not in sermons, but in structure. Tree dies and returns over and over again. That's resurrection imagery, but resurrection is not automatically salvation. Resurrection can be torture if it's endless. So the question becomes, what turns resurrection into liberation? What turns repetition into grace? In these films, the answer is transformation. The loop stops being purely horrific when Tree stops being purely selfish. Not because the universe rewards morality like a vending machine, but because the loop seems to be a crucible designed to burn away what is false. And again, you can say science all day long. You can point to an experimental device and feel comforted. But the emotional logic remains cosmic in nature, because the loop functions like a force that stands outside of our understanding, shaping her life in a way that feels simultaneously cruel and purposeful. And that tension is what makes it compelling. Because if it were purely purposeful, it would feel like fate, like God, like a moral universe. If it were purely random, it would feel like nihilism, like chaos, like cosmic indifference. It would become an H.P. Lovecraft story. Happy Death Day lives in the unnerving middle. It feels like the universe has intent, but refuses to explain itself. It feels like Tree is being guided, but through suffering. It feels like there are rules, but they are revealed only when you're already bleeding. That's cosmic horror with a smile on its face. Not the horror of monsters from beyond the stars, but the horror of realizing that you are small, inside of a system that can rearrange your life without asking permission. And yet the films don't land in despair, they land in a kind of hard-won hope. Not the naive hope that says everything happens for a reason, but the mature hope that says even if I never know the reason, I can still choose meaning for myself. Even if the cosmos is unknowable, I can still become someone worth being. Even if reality can be rewritten, I can still commit to the life that I have. That's why these movies endure. They're funny, they're clever, they're crowd pleasers. But underneath all of that, they're about something intimate and deeply terrifying. The loop is not simply a plot device. It is a cosmic mirror. It is a cosmic pressure cooker. And the most unsettling implication isn't that Tree dies over and over again. It's that something in the universe keeps putting her back until she finally became the kind of person who could live. And the moment you say that out loud, you realize why the explanation never fully satisfies. Because a machine can explain a mechanism. It can't explain why the mechanism feels like a judgment or a test or a strange, merciful cruelty or a cosmic force that refuses to let you stay the same. That's the haunting aftertaste of Happy Death Day. The loop is bigger than the characters, bigger than the science, bigger than the plot. And it leaves you with the same haunting question that sits at the center of so many spiritual and cosmic horror stories alike. What if the universe doesn't just happen? What if it's not random? What if it is watching? What if it's there to shape you? And what if you don't get to know why?